Welcome everybody to our CIWEM Southeast Branch webinar, lunchtime webinar. We'll be getting underway about a minute or so. So we will be talking about the Blue Heart project. We'll go into more details about that. That's part of the presentation. We'll just start off with a few sort of CIWEM general bits and pieces to get us going. Anna, if you could move us on. All right, so a couple of bits of general housekeeping. This webinar is being recorded. That's so that we can obviously share it for those who couldn't attend today, and will be available on the CIWEM YouTube channel, which the link is there. Lots of other talks as well available, so I recommend going and having a little look around. If you've got any technical problems, we have Barbara from CIWEM is sitting, and she'll be looking over at the chat. So the chat function. So if you've got any problems like you can't hear us, you can't see anything or whatnot, just put anything in the chat, and Barbara can help you. Any questions that you might have, we're going to take at the end. So can you please put those in the Q&A? So we've got these two things: chat for technical, Q&A for questions, and Anna and I will be looking at those at the end of the session. So this, I think the other thing is just that it's equals 1 hour CPD. But we don't provide certificates because it's not kind of official accredited training, but you can put it down as 1 hour CPD, so that's good, isn't it? Next one. Thank you, Anna. Yep, a few bits about CIWEM. CIWEM is Royal Chartered Professional Body and independent charity. So if you are new to CIWEM and you haven't sort of listened to any of these sorts of talks before, welcome. We are a friendly bunch, interested in all things water environment related, which is obviously a very broad area. So do get in touch. There's lots of groups as well. So we are the Southeast branch, so generally sort of Kent, Sussex, bits of Hampshire and the like. But there's groups all over the UK to get involved with, so it's the best way. So yep, we have a few other bits there: CIWEM vision and strategy, membership. Obviously, there's different levels of membership that you can sort of join or be part of, and there's lots of information on the website. Equally, you can get in touch with CIWEM membership team as well. They're very useful, so I recommend doing that. There's a couple of things coming up on the policy side. Freshwater Future, there's a conference coming up on that, so the links there. Postcards from the Edge, highway runoff and the water environment, and Be Flood Ready, and enabling water smart communities. So there's loads of things going on, all different areas. So just click on the links. Barbara's posting some as well in the chat if you're interested. So lots to get involved with. All right, I think that's enough about the CIWEM bits, I think. So Anna, if you want to move on.
Thank you, Lisa. So myself and Lisa are doing a bit of a double act today about the Blue Heart project. So looking at improving flood resilience in Eastbourne and southern Wealden. But just to give an overview of what we'll be covering. So firstly, I'll be covering the Flood and Coastal Resilience Innovation Programme, also under the name or under the acronym FCRIP, for those who are more familiar with that term. Also giving an overview of Blue Heart, so covering why we wanted to do the project in the first place and what our goals and ambitions are for the project. And then we'll be giving a progress to date, which will be more of a hybrid between myself and Lisa. So Lisa will be covering aspects that JBA Consulting have been involved with as part of the project. And then lastly, finishing off with where next in Blue Heart as we enter the final half of the project. Before I begin, I do have one plea, which if you do have a smartphone to hand, if you're able to scan the QR code, or equally, Barbara, I believe, will be putting a link in the chat, and I'll explain more at the end of the presentation about what that's all about. So first and foremost, the Flood and Coastal Innovation Programme, FSIP, which the Flood and Coastal Resilience Innovation Programme, FCRIP, sits under. So this was a programme announced back in 2020 where the government announced £200 million worth of funding over 6 years to deliver innovative actions to improve resilience to flooding in 25 local areas. So these 25 local areas, they had to be projects which are going to be led by an LLFA, a lead local flood authority, such as ourselves, East Sussex. And essentially, they were looking to test and pilot new ways of delivering adaptation and resilience. And by operating as essentially pilots, they wanted to generate evidence on the costs and the benefits of some of these resilience and adaptation actions. So some of these actions have never been delivered or trialled before. So essentially quite an academic-based programme, and the first of its kind, I believe, in the UK. And through those projects, they're largely wanting to enhance local resilience and adaptation capacity and use the evidence gathered to inform future policy investment and also share the learning from the projects nationally. So ourselves as East Sussex, we're really wanting to learn from what we're doing and share it on a national stage that other projects, other local authorities, other risk management authorities can learn from what we're doing. So as I mentioned, FCRIP sits within the FSIP programme. So the FSIP programme is contained of 3 different programmes. So there's us on the Flood and Coastal Resilience Innovation Programme, which covers £150 million. Then we've got the Adaptation Pathway Programmes, which covers £8 million of investment. And then the Coastal Transition Accelerator Programme, which covers £36 million. So all those projects and their locations are illustrated on the map on the right. So we sit quite lonely down in the bottom corner of England. So the projects are really covering England, but they are covering a whole wide range of different measures. So there's everything ranging from PFR projects, nature-based solutions, investigation of groundwater, and flood warnings and telemetry. But it's worth also adding that the innovation programme isn't just about the measures being delivered in terms of innovation, it's also looking at how projects can be delivered in a different way and innovations within that. So that could be different project management styles, different ways of gathering data, different engagement techniques. So a whole host of really exciting things going on in the 25 projects within FCRIP. So on to Blue Heart, which is the project that I manage and sits on the FCRIP programme. What are we doing? So Blue Heart is a project down in Eastbourne and Southern Wealden. When I say Southern Wealden, this is the area in the kind of the green area, so stretching from Polegate to Pevensey, and then also has the borough of Eastbourne. I have a number of different partners on the project, but essentially it's all risk management authorities that are involved with management of water. So you have Wealden District Council and Eastbourne Borough Council as the planning authorities with the statutory role in the coast. We've got Severn Water as our water company and sewage provider. Pevensey and Cookmere Water Level Management Board as our IDB, the Environment Agency, and ourselves, East Sussex County Council, as the lead local flood authority. And then we've also got University of Exeter on board as our academic partner to help with some of the research and the evaluation process through the project. But why did we pick Eastbourne and Severn Wealden? Why not other parts of East Sussex? So Eastbourne is ranked as the highest area of flood risk within our East Sussex local flood risk management strategy. And really this is illustrated by the complex flood risk in the area. I like to say Eastbourne's got it all in terms of flood risk. It's bounded by the coast, it has areas of groundwater risk, high surface water flood risk, sewer flooding, and fluvial flooding. So all kind of sources of flood risk really, but really it's the complex interactions between these sources that really bring a problem for Eastbourne. So an event that really describes this is the 2015 flood event, and the hydrograph for that is down in the bottom right hand corner. So on this occasion, we had our first peak rainfall event come into the area. So this was about a 1 in 12 year event, but no flooding happened during this. However, a couple of hours later, a second event came in, which was a 1 in 2 year. But this event occurred at a high tide, so tidal locking occurred and water had nowhere to go. on top of the fact we already had a saturated catchment. So it's really illustrating the interconnected nature of different sources of flood risks combined with one another, and raise the question of how can we resolve this going forward in the future. Going on to the data, so Eastbourne has 4,102 properties at risk from surface water flooding and 363 properties at risk from fluvial flooding, as picked out by our outline business case. And this equates to up to £152 million worth of potential damages. And what does this look from our outline business case, looking at the Blue Heart investment versus potential damages, or through the application of the multicoloured manual and looking at if we were to introduce a flood warning service to the area, there could be a potential benefit cost ratio of 3.91 if we're looking at a £4.4 million investment from the FGRIP programme versus a potential damages of a 20% reduction and a £17,400,000. So lastly, two further points on why Eastbourne and Wealden. In the area, there's really a loss of knowledge and lack of data. For an area which is quite complex in flood risk, there's only about 4 gauges covering the area prior to Blue Heart's investment. And for such a complicated watercourse network, it's not sufficient enough for management of water and informed strategic decisions going forward. And lastly, people may be aware that nationally flood warnings are only provided by the Environment Agency and Met Office, traditionally for fluvial flooding and the coast. There isn't currently a service for groundwater, surface water or sewer flooding. And when you think of a place like Eastbourne, thinking about the stats previously on the screen, where we've got over 300 properties at risk from fluvial, but over 4,000 properties at risk from surface water, that's a significant resilience gap for the area. And the video that's just been playing on the screen, this was an event from just a couple of weeks ago, the 22nd of September, and is an area which frequently floods within Eastbourne. And this, it's a pub that's flooding. They can't receive funding for PFR because they are a commercial property and they're not covered by a flood warning service. So really illustrates the kind of the problems that we're trying to address through the Blue Heart project. Right. So where do we want to go? So we kind of got 3 themes for our objectives. So first of all, we want to improve the understanding in Eastbourne, and we want to address some of the gaps previously shown on the previous screen with some of the gaps in gauges through installing telemetry. So we're hoping to install up to 100 new sensors in the Eastbourne catchment, and also provide a new integrated flood model that is looking at all sources of flood risk for the area. And via the modelling and the telemetry, we want to have a much more detailed and comprehensive understanding of how water moves through the catchment and what we can do in the future to help mitigate this. We're also engaging with communities and stakeholders. So sadly, I don't have enough time to really cover some of our engagement and community work packages and work streams. But essentially, we are wanting to raise awareness of flood risk and resilience in the areas of Eastbourne, with a particular focus on those who haven't previously flooded but are at risk in the future or currently from flooding. And we want to use local knowledge to guide some of the research and decision making for future management of the catchment, as well as also providing some of our newfound understanding from our telemetry data and providing that to communities so they can make their own decisions for resilience actions. And lastly, we want to create what we're currently calling a dynamic network system. Still need to come up with a bit of a better name for this. But essentially, we want to create an integrated flood risk management platform. So a platform which all different risk management authorities, so the Environment Agency, District and Borough, Water Company, IDB, all in the same platform and sharing their data. So this will involve largely the sensors from multiple stakeholders all in one place. And using this data, we then want to create a enhanced flood warning and alert service. So a service which isn't just covering the coast and fluvial, looking at groundwater, surface water, and sewer flooding for the first time. And then lastly, we want to kind of head towards installing real-time control. So with our new sensors, our new integrated model, we have the opportunity for a digital twin and optimizing a catchment. And could we install devices which could control water levels? If we think about to the 2015 flood event, where we had a rainfall event come in, and then another event forecast at a high tide, with a system like this in place, could we ahead of time lower water levels in the system to provide more space for water? And what does this look in terms of a journey and a diagram? So first of all, we're addressing some of our modelling gaps. So we've merged together our fluvial model and surface water model to create an integrated model. And we're also installing our telemetry. And with both of those, we want to achieve system operation and technology understanding of the area. Once we have that in place as our baseline, we want to have then live telemetry warnings, so alerts sending out to risk management authorities when we've got increasing levels or low levels in times of drought, and then bringing into that rainfall forecast. Following that, we want to combine our forecast and telemetry information to be able to have flood forecasting available for the area. And then after that, have the opportunity for real-time control of assets. So the approach we're using to deliver the project has been developed by University of Exeter. So this is called a smart stormwater management wheel. And essentially, it's a roadmap that allows for a cycle to go through as a project rather than a linear process for project delivery. And that's allowing us to have more of an agile project management approach to the project, so that when we go through a certain phase, we kind of pause, we reflect, and then we go back around the wheel once again to apply some of our learning. And this is allowing us to have a much more flexible and iterative approach for developing the project, which when we're working with innovation, and particularly a project over 6 years, we need to allow space in our programme to be able to develop and learn and adapt as we go along with new technology. So how does this look in terms of going around the wheel? Once we go around the wheel as a certain iteration, we could have different components go up in terms of from low to high in terms of implementation. So I'm going to talk through our telemetry work stream in particular, where we've applied this approach. So phase one of our telemetry work package, this was really during our outline business case phase, where we wanted to use our first phase of installations to really learn from doing. So we installed 14 sensors ourselves. So these were 7 boreholes and 7 water level sensors at easy win locations. And we also kindly had 7 water install, 6 sewer level monitors on the surface water network. And as a local authority, this was our kind of first experience of dipping into the telemetry world. So there was a lot of learning initially from this phase, but allowed us to do our first iteration of the wheel. But as we entered into our phase 2, we applied our learning from phase 1, which largely related to battery life, and top tip being, don't always believe what the supplier says in terms of battery life on a sensor. So we found in our phase 1 installations that they weren't lasting as long as we'd liked, but some of that was largely because we were asking for quite high frequency of data upload and measurement. So how did we apply this learning in phase 2? Well, we introduced something called dynamic logging, which essentially we set a threshold for when data will send back to us at higher frequencies. So an example being currently when it's a dry day like today, we're only receiving data approximately twice a day. But in times of flooding, when levels begin to increase, that data will then begin to send to us more rapidly until levels drop. And we found that's already significantly reducing our battery life, which has been a great learning. And another learning from phase one, because in phase one we didn't specify to a supplier kind of how installations would be or sensor type, we had quite sort of plastic casing on some of our sensors. Whereas you can see on our phase two sites, we've gone for more of a stainless steel encasement. So in phase one, we had one incident of vandalism where one of the sensors was sort of chucked into the channel. Whereas in phase two, even though they've all been in the ground for nearly 12 months now, and there's about 52 of them installed as part of this phase, we've not had any incidents of vandalism, putting some of that down to a better choice of casing for our sensors. But also within phase two, so I've mentioned already the 53 water level sensors we've had installed, but we've also had 30 rain gauges installed, 15 of those within the catchment itself and the other 15 across the county to provide data of rainfall information coming into the area. And we've also done 15 water butt monitors and as part of our water butt pilot deployment. So that brings our current sensor count up to 118 as of beginning of this year as phase two ended. I already mentioned the dynamic logging, but in this phase, we kind of switched to a pressure sensor, which was provided by Kistas. When moving into phase three, which is the phase that we are in now, this is really where our map has certainly boomed in terms of number of sensors we have shown by the image. But phase three has been a focus of pulling in partner data so we can achieve all risk management authorities having their data in one place. So more recently, we've had Southern Water provide their data from their network digitization program. So that's over 400 new sewer level monitors in the area that we now have access to. But other future plans for phase three include level monitors in our SUDS for Schools program. So this year we're retrofitting SUDS in 9 schools this year, but we're wanting to have monitoring on those SUDS to look at performance of those and also provide additional intel for how water is behaving in the catchment. And we're also looking at installing highway gully monitors and further boreholes as well. Yeah, so really pleased to say that our current sensor count is on 518, so already exceeding what we originally promised, which was up to 100 sensors. But a big part of this has really been through our partnership working from Southern Water in particular for this achievement. So now I'm going to hand across to Lisa, who's going to go across different projects that JBA have been working on as part of Blue Heart.
Great, thanks, Anna. So yeah, I'm Lisa. I'm from, as Anna mentioned, I'm from JBA Consulting. I work predominantly in hydrology, but as this slide shows, it's very much a collaborative effort on the Blue Heart, and all, in general, we work on a few other FGRIP projects, and they're all kind of a similar nature, bringing in together different partners. So our role really is to look at kind of some of those technical aspects, which I'll come on to 3 examples. There are a few more others that we're doing, but just for to keep to time today, particularly for model development, trying to think how we can use all that data that Anne has mentioned to basically improve water level management generally, particularly looking at sort of flood risk, but ideally looking at water level management, how that might link to assets and all this sort of good stuff. So anyway, on the screen we have some of the people that they've worked with, obviously Sussex and the EA, Exeter University, Kistas, who's been involved with the telemetry but also on the software side as well, District Borough Councils, and Pevensey Cookmere Water Level Management Board, and Agile Rabbit, and also they're at the bottom of the list, but possibly should be at the top of the public. They're very much part and parcel of the picture, and has been part of the consultation process as well. So I've also just realised we didn't put on Southern Water. So if you're on the call, apologies. They're also obviously because of the data and advice have been on there as well. Within JBA itself, we have lots of different disciplines involved in this. the FGRIP projects are quite unique in that it gives us the space to really sort of think a little bit differently and test things, and maybe go with methods that we wouldn't usually kind of try out, sort of aren't maybe so traditional. So yeah, it's a really, really good opportunity to get everybody on board. So we've got people from meteorology, hydrology like myself, modelling, flood forecasting, data science, and software development, and I'll come on to those in a bit. Special thanks to Emily Jones and Roxanne Upton in JB8 for helping me with some of the images as well on this. All right, next slide, thanks Anna. All right, so some of the projects we'll be looking at, we looked at deriving rainfall thresholds, evaluation of the flood incident database that really came out of the deriving of rainfall thresholds work. So again, it's kind of learning from what you've done and feeding it back into the process on this project. And finally, creating the flood warning system. All right, next slide, please. And next one. Okay, so East Sussex have a piece of software that's again, it's a Kista's product called HydroMaster, where they can view rainfall forecasts and actuals and how that's happening in real time. So for example, this image is from the 18th, so 2 days ago, about 1 o'clock in the morning. Nothing, it's not a particularly notable instance or anything like that. It was just so that I could get some data on the screen. And it just shows here the East Sussex area. So here for this project, we actually widened it out slightly to the whole of the East Sussex area. So not just Blue Heart, but so this is why it's showing the whole of the East Sussex area. And those kind of sort of sub-catchments, which are kind of based on areas of sort of flood risk areas, it's where sub-catchments of interest. And the colouring there is really based on sort of thresholds and what's been crossed based on the radar rainfall data. So here we're taking in radar rainfall from the Met Office. So when certain thresholds are crossed, then you'll see different colours appearing on the map. That's the idea. But the question is, how do we set those thresholds? In an ideal world, well, potentially once a threshold was crossed, you can then, that will trigger an action or additional monitoring or some sort of change in asset maintenance or operation. So we need to have a very good idea what these thresholds actually are. So next slide, Anna, please. So what we did was we took all the sort of looking at radar data for all those catchments that you saw on the screen before. Now, the ideal way to do this is obviously to look at historical events, flood events that have happened in the area, and relate these to the rainfall that has driven that. That's kind of, you could then get a very good idea or a picture of what are the volumes and the amounts that caused that flooding. That's kind of the general idea. Those events sit within the flood incident database, which is managed by East Sussex County Council. Unfortunately, what we found relatively quickly is the data within the flood incident database was not sufficient to allow us to link it to rainfall in a consistent and reliable manner. So that's what then spurred the second project, which I'll come on to it in a little bit. So what we had to do instead on this one is look at very much the data. So we kind of looked at about 20 years worth of data, and this is sort of very sort of frequent 15-minute data over a 20-year period. And we analysed this to try and derive these thresholds. At what point can we say it is an event that might cause flooding? Again, what you define as event is a very fluid concept, but in this sense, generally you kind of say at what point above that is it going to start causing problems on the ground, whether it be drainage issues or property flooding or whatever that is. So it was very iterative, and I appreciate this graph is quite busy. So I won't go into every single little bit of this graph, but what it's just showing is that we've got an alarm and a pre-alarm. A pre-alarm is just in essence a bit of a heads up, and then that something's going to happen, and then the threshold is actually we think something's going to happen. So similar idea to if you're familiar to Environment Agency kind of threshold crossing, but just be mindful that the terminology is different. I won't go into that right now, but the terminology is different. So here we have the red line is the alarm threshold and the yellow is the pre-alarm threshold. But really we were focusing more on the alarms just because we were kind of doing the proof of just to kind of get the idea. And then what we've done is we've set up the thresholds and we're running them for a 12-month evaluation period. But what this graph, the interesting part of this graph, and there is an interesting part, is that is the diamonds. So you'll see that the diamonds mean these are what we consider to be events. So yes, there are some that are above that red line. So we've done our data analysis, which was largely sort of programmatic, or we kind of used R coding to analyze that data to derive these rainfall thresholds. And yes, there were some significant events that were picked up, that would have been picked up by those thresholds. But there are also a number, potentially a number of alarms that would have been alerts that would have happened when there weren't events. So again, that's something else we need to look at. On the flip side, there are also quite a few events, those diamonds beneath those lines, which wouldn't have been picked up. So this is quite interesting because so here we're starting to break down to what events are happening that might not have triggered. Are they, there's a problem with the data? Is there something, there could be very much a problem with how we set the thresholds. But there's also potentially lots of other things going on. Anna alluded to this is a complex integrated system, very much so. And there are significant sort of drainage sewer interactions here. So therefore, largely, yes, connected with rainfall, because obviously intense rainfall events, you'll get that kind of taking up that capacity, but potentially localized drainage issues are really, and things like blockages or sort of very localized drainage things might be the driving force rather than the rainfall. And that's something we won't, by setting rainfall thresholds, you won't be able to pick those up. So there will always be an element of trying to, you have to allow for, you won't be able to pick those up, that's what I'm trying to say. So we did this for different durations. So at the top left, it says 1 hour rainfall, but we looked at other durations as well. So we have many of these plots. And so what we've done is set up these rainfall thresholds, and we've set them just going in the background at the moment. They don't trigger anything right now, but come the new year, we'll be doing an evaluation of those just to see how they're sitting. Generally at the moment, having initial thought is that they're just set a little bit too high. We're getting loads and loads of alarms and alerts. So we'll probably look at reducing those. So yeah, but again, it'll be something that we continually learn again about. Next slide, please, Anna. Okay, so the second project I'll mention is the evaluation of flood incident database. Next slide, thank you. So as I mentioned, ideally, this flood incident database would really drive that connection between rainfall and flooding. But the incident database itself is large. This just shows a map of some of those points and where they're located. So we've got various different types here. The labeling is based on those kind of categorizations that are within the database at the moment. Obviously, it doesn't mean they're not they're not mutually exclusive. So you have surface water sewer, foul sewer, highway drainage, pluvial, coastal. So lots of these are actually overlapping. So it's not the case of an event is purely one or the other. So there's a lot of ambiguity in the database as it's currently designed. And what we really want to do is try and bring out all of that information and make it clearer, more transparent, and easier for us to analyze afterwards. So next slide, Anna, please. So at the moment, it's an Excel-based system. There's over 21,000 incidents recorded. The data is gathered by several stakeholders across the area, and it's kind of coordinated by Anna's team. So, for example, lead local flood authority, highways, other district, borough and councils. There's lots of people involved here. Again, a collaborative effort. All again with varying degrees of availability and technical skill in order to sort of record. So that's something else they're going to have to think about, is how we design this better so that it's, you know, it's just very easy for people to record instance, but that the information is accurate and timely. This is updated annually, and it is essential for discharging statutory duties by East Sussex. So things like Section 19 investigations, some of you might be aware of, that are required post-event for lead local flood authorities. They have to undertake these investigations, and the FID work will feed into that. So really, this data that we keep coming back to is important. This database of actual observed events is important to all the other things that we're doing. We need to know where the events happen, when they happen, what's the impact of that. So as you can imagine, there's lots and lots of records where someone's just gone, it rained, so or it flooded, or this sort of level. But then you may get other entries that are really detailed. So you might be talking someone else, you know, there was 10 mil of rain and there's flooding in this location at this time. The depth is about, you know, 20 centimeters or whatever it is. So there's a real variation in just the level of information depending on who's doing the recording. Next slide, please, Anna. Okay, so as we come back to data. So there's 21,000 records in that FID, so it's not exactly something easily we can manually go through and look at. So what we did was used an AI-based approach, and this word cloud, everybody loves a word cloud, is just based on the things that immediately came out of the FID when we looked at it. Interestingly, the biggest one that jumps out is blocked, which kind of echoed how we were feeling, because it felt very much like there were a lot of drainage issues, and we're trying to tease out these different mechanisms. So it's quite interesting that that jumped out. Next slide, please. So we were using AI. So apologies if you know nothing about AI and this feels a bit techie. I'm also not I'm not in the data science team, so I've kind of come on board as an interested party. So let's see. Our challenge was to categorize inconsistent free text. So that's, like I say, anybody can write anything in any field. Some of the fields are fixed in terms of what you can enter, for example, a date, but there's a lot of free text in there. So what we used, we tried various different things. That's the beauty of FCRIP. And so we started with ChatGPT. We did significant data cleaning and prompt engineering. For those who have used AI, you will be very familiar that how you ask the AI how to do something, whether this be review an email or check my data, whatever you're asking of the AI, how you ask AI is very important, because it will give you very different answers. And you will need to do, for more complex things like this, you will need to do a lot of what we call prompt engineering. So that's basically me saying to the AI, can you just separate the flooding into these three forms, and it will give it a go, and you'll realize it hasn't done a very good job. So you then might improve it. Okay, can you separate into these types of flooding where these specific words are used, and start building it that way. So you kind of build up your prompts like that. So that's what we mean by prompt engineering. This using the sort of ChatGPT method didn't work too well. It was we needed more advanced models. So we also tried Python, but that wasn't that flexible. So we ended up really the one that did the best, OpenAI API. This uses, like I say, more advanced AI models, which are more flexible in pattern recognition. So what I mean by that is where there might be, it's a bit smarter in looking at words that are similar to other words. So you might have where terminology is reversed, or the words are in a different order, or they're not that might be spelt slightly differently. So it's kind of, these models we found are better at looking at that kind of variation. And that's really what we needed here, because again, because of this inconsistent and free text, it allowed the user to do really what they wanted. So that's what we needed that for. And we also needed categorization for over 300,000 words of free text descriptions. That point there is just to show that we needed to do a lot of iteration and for the AI effectively to look at lots and lots of different patterns. It wasn't just and that for that you need, again, these more advanced systems. I've just put the accuracy up, which when I first saw these numbers, I wasn't terribly happy with them. But talking to my data science colleagues, an increase from accuracy of 40%. So when I say accuracy, that's compared with a manual. So that's where someone actually went through it manually and started categorizing, so that we had a set of records that we were happy with how they were categorized. So when I say categorize, that's into different types of flooding. So we were looking at different types of flooding. We were also looking at flooding compared with maybe other things that could be flooding, but not in a kind of a fluvial sense or a surface water sense. There could be other issues going on. So we had a set of data, or training, not training, we had data that was verification, that's what I'm looking for, effectively to compare the AI against. So that's what I mean by accuracy. With ChatGPT, that was quite low in those methods, but so that went up to 63% with OpenAI. So it's doing a much better job. Yes, there's room for improvement, but it has helped us to analyze a lot of information much quicker than we could ever do manually. So thank you, Anna. Next slide. Yeah, this just gives you, so here I've just included a few slides on some of the outputs. There's many, many more than these, but and again, this starts to just give us an idea. As you can see, the top one is other flooding, which is not terribly helpful, but it's just reflecting that some of these issues just are not easy to tease out, and that is still a large part of the FID. So again, we're going to take this forward and going, right, we need to try and almost force people when they put data in to make a decision or make some sort of assessment, and why they're doing that when they put the information in. We can't break those down anymore without spending months and months and months on this, and probably going much more down the manual route as opposed to the AI route. But we do have quite a lot of categories. Yes, some of them will be similar. So this is just AI having a look at it. And again, we're just looking at really as how can we do this in future? How could we use AI better? So again, it was a bit of a proof of innovation, if that makes sense. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, this is just a quick, interesting one. I thought, just showing the seasonality of the different categories. Yes, we've got more incidents in January, for example, in the flooding category, and November and December, which is kind of what you'd expect. But interesting also, it also reflecting the August, more those convective, more intense storms as well in August. So it's just interesting that we are seeing something of what we would expect from the data as well. Next slide, please. Okay, what's next for the FID? So we've done some analysis, as mentioned. We have gained more insight, particularly around what AI can do to help us, and it has been useful. But really, we need to start now thinking about a new structure for the FID. And as I say, this FID sort of writes all the other projects really, and gives us that really good observed data, which we always need, don't we? So what we're doing at the moment is talking to stakeholders. How are they going to use it? What grumbles do they have about the current system? But also really getting their ideas of how we can improve it. Can we have, for example, like it says on the screen there, a web-based system where they just have their phone or their tablet, they're out and about on their duties, particularly, you know, teams like highways, for example, you know, they're often out and about, they notice something, they can just quickly log it, takes them seconds to do, and that's all they have to think about. We have the systems that sit behind it that pull across rainfall data, or they can log the date and the time, the location, a photograph, things like this. So it's it's doing a lot more of the work for the person, rather than them having to really think about, oh, what's the flooding mechanism, not sure, you know. So yeah, fixed data entry, yeah, there will need to be more of that, so that to get away from this kind of inconsistent nature. Automated data entry from online data systems. So there's the hydromaster systems, which holds the rainfall. Potentially we can pull in the rainfall from that and look at the severity of the rainfall that might have led up to that flooding pretty much in real time. Instant recording in fields dimension, and timely data verification. This is really important, because at the moment East Sussex kind of review this on an annual basis, but we kind of need ideally to have some sort of more of a check that happens, and that could be an automated check or just a very easy check for someone in Anna's team to do. We're not sure yet. So again, all of this is a little bit of a let's see what we can do. So that's the FID. And I'll move on to the last one now, I think. Yep, flood warning system. Next slide, please, Anna. This is, I nicked Anna's slide on this. These are the two main bits that we're focusing on mainly. We've been building the integrated model that Anna mentioned. I won't go into that too much. That's a whole webinar in itself. But then we're really looking forward now in how we're going to use that into creating some sort of flood warning system. So next slide, please, Anna. So the integrated catchment model that has been built incorporates all these different models. I'll come back to groundwater later, but rivers, lakes, coast, tides, sewers, and surface water certainly. There was surface water model we already had, fluvial model we already had, and then we also have information from Southern Water and their sewer model. So lots of models, and the idea is we bring them all together into a complicated integrated catchment model, which is what was done separately as a separate project. Like I mentioned, I'm not going into detail on that now. Next slide, please, Anna. But as that shows, it's just a complicated picture. As Anna said earlier, Eastbourne has it all, which when you're trying to work out flood warning, a flood warning system may not be the best thing, but it's it's from a public point of view, this is what they need. So the integrated model looks at these different elements. I've already mentioned these actually. So next slide, please. This is just an example output of that. So it's kind of a classic sort of flood extent map. This is for the Eastbourne area. Next slide, please. So really what we're now looking at is how can we take that integrated catchment model and use it with rainfall forecast data to in sort of near real time to try and estimate what's going to happen on the ground. So obviously we already have the fluvial flood warning system. That's separate, and that's managed run by the EA. That's a very complicated system. Lead local flood authorities, however, though, they are responsible for managing local flood risk, defined as that from surface water, groundwater, and ordinary watercourses. So just thinking, putting our public hat on again, fluvial's fine, but if your house sits in a sort of in a risk of surface water flooding, then you're going to have questions about that. So next slide, please. So this is what we're working on at the moment. So this is very much a work in progress. So as I mentioned, taking the integrated catchment model, this is a complex model. It takes a very long time to run at the moment. We're talking days. So we can't use it in real time. So one of the ideas is we take fixed outputs from previous runs that we've done with the model, and we effectively create a bit of a lookup library and then relate that to the rainfall, and then effectively pull out what we think is the expected flood extent. Or moving on to something a bit more dynamic, using AI to effectively mimic the integrated catchment model. So use the model and the data to train an AI to do the same sort of job, but in a much faster, and which we can then use in a more real-time operational sense. So that's something we're thinking about right now. But probably in reality, there's going to be a mixed bag, because we have different mechanisms. We've got fluvial, we've got surface water, we've got sewer, we've got coast, and also groundwater, which hasn't been explicitly sort of modelled. We don't have that groundwater model. That's not an element of the integrated model. So that's something we have to think about fortunately, groundwater levels kind of sort of vary in a much slower manner than compared with fluvial. So there is that. But it's going to probably be a mixture of things because of just depending on where you are sitting in the catchment, what's your key flooding mechanism? Could we just have a rainfall runoff model that derives a fluvial forecast for a particular community, or is it always going to be a very much an integrated picture? So yeah, a few challenges there. Rainfall uncertainty is always going to be the biggest. That's not something we can easily fix. So it's about minimizing what we can, minimize in terms of uncertainty, and looking at how we also communicate this out to stakeholders and potentially even the public. We need to be transparent in that. It is just a forecast, but we need to still be clear in our communication. And I mentioned groundwater. So next slide, please. I think that's pretty much over to you.
No. Thank you, Lisa. So I'm just going to wrap up with other where next and how do we plan to use the data and the tools that Blue Heart is developing. So we want to implement our phase 3 installation. So this will be our final phase of installation. So really mopping up and applying all of our learning to date. As Lisa's already mentioned, incorporating our new telemetry data into new flood warning system. So the rainfall thresholds we're currently using is only based upon rainfall forecast. It's not currently looking at telemetry information, so looking at kind of merging the two together as a next step. Also exploring options for control of water bodies and SUDs using catchment optimization digital twin. So this is what I was alluring to earlier on in the presentation around testing real-time control so that we can operate water levels ahead of time from when our system is forecasting flooding from happening from our sensors. Providing the data to the public. So this will be via our engagement workstream. So looking at options at the moment of how the general public could use the data, not only for flood risk kind of monitoring, but other ways of using the data. So whether it's for recreational activities or other relevant community groups. So really kind of being transparent and open with our data. Engaging with the wider sector, so doing presentations such as this, but I think we are in quite a unique opportunity. I believe we are the first catchment in the UK that has all data from multiple risk management authorities, certainly the Environment Agency, local authority and water company all in one place. And with kind of a very detailed telemetered catchment. So looking at opportunities in the sector. So welcome any suggestions or interest from those on the call who might want to utilise some of our data or have ideas. And then lastly, identifying and refining legacy options beyond 2027. So this is both for future flood alleviation schemes with our new knowledge and intel, so how we could help reduce flood risk in the area, but also for securing funding for maintaining the system going forward. So I'm going to end on my final slide, which is what I had at the beginning of the presentation, which for those who aren't aware or haven't heard, one of the outputs of Blue Heart has been the Lego Flood House, which came off the back of an engagement event. And we have now gone and developed a Lego Flood House, and we are now seeking 10,000 supporters via Lego's Lego Ideas platform. So we need your help to get 10,000 supporters. So either scanning the QR code, which hopefully you've already scanned at the beginning of this webinar, but I believe Barbara has also put a link in the chat as well. So thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks. And I think we've had a few questions, which you've also very helpfully answered. So thanks for that. There is one question which someone's asked, which I think is more of a you question. Will you encourage the use of NFM given the grants that can be awarded by the EA? If yes, what sort of strategies and techniques are you looking at?
So we're currently not looking at NFM because we're still in that data gathering stage, but a next stage of the hydraulic modelling is kind of testing and doing sensitivity tests of where we could create new storage areas or operate structures in a different way, so it's optimizing the catchment. So not at the moment, but it's worth noting that in East Sussex, generally infiltration tends to be quite poor due to geology. So traditionally, when we've looked at it in the past as an LFA, it hasn't been as suitable for our catchments. But now that we've got the model and our telemetry network, we'll be looking at a number of different future schemes for the area, such as SUDS, PFR, and other techniques. So not at the moment, but welcome to look at it as a project and see whether it's viable.
Great, thank you. Oh, we've got another question. How can we, I want to celebrate this question, how could we get involved with that? Always like volunteers.
Yeah, I'm always happy to take volunteers. So I guess happy for people to reach out to myself or Lisa. So my email address is on the screen there, or we do have our website if you have ideas you want to put forward.
Yeah, I should probably echo that in terms of Blue Heart's quite active on social media, so especially LinkedIn. So if you're on those platforms, definitely go have a look. Also, if you are, I should probably also say I'm interested in CIWEM Southeast events or getting involved with the Southeast branch, then email me, like my details on the screen there as well. So I think those are certainly all the questions in the Q&A. Does anybody, I'm very mindful of the time as well, so does anybody have any, I've got a few final bits to say on CIWEM. I just want to open up to anybody on the call, whether you wanted to ask a question in live. I don't know how you say that these days. Anyone got a question? No. Okay, so Anna, if you, I think we've got a few final bits, CIWEM bits. Have I got that right? Yeah, CIWEM events. So have a look at the events coming up on the CIWEM page. There's a few links there, past recording on the YouTube. We've got the Freshwater Futures Conference. I've seen this, a few people talking online about this. So yep, that's coming up very soon on 3rd of December in London. That's an in-person event. And there's the link if you want to join that as well. Plus the Planet Possible podcast by Nikki Roach. It's quite an interesting listen, various different topics. So again, that's recommended. Is there any other? I'm not sure. Oh, there is. Sorry. There's also the journals as well. Forgot this one. Journal of Flood Risk Management, Water Environmental Journal, Environment Magazine, and there are various links. So there's call for papers, innovation management towards improved resilience to flooding. That's interesting. So the mission deadline is 31st of January. And then new modelling techniques for urban flood modelling and forecasting. Oh, very interesting. Submission deadline Sunday, the 31st of August next year. So you've got some time to think about that one. And then call for papers for the Water Environment Journal, Environmental Biotechnology submission for that is 31st of January in 25. So a few things there. If your research or project sits in under any of those, do get involved. We would like to hear these things. Get yourself published as well. So thank you very much. I definitely think that's the last slide. So if anyone has any questions, then you can raise your hand or put it in the Q&A. Else, we thank you very much for being here with us today.